Hey guys, my name is Zhenya and today's video is going to be a November reading wrap-up where I give a really quick spoiler-free summary of all the books that I read in November, as well as talk about the books that I am wanting to read in December. In this month, I read 7 books. I was going through a little bit of a reading slump where I wasn't finding a ton of motivation to read, and I was also traveling a lot, which did not help things. But nonetheless, I did read some really enjoyable books and I'm looking forward to talking about them. The first book that I read, I did start on Halloween, but I ended up finishing it in November, so that's why it's in this video, and it's Misery by Stephen King. Stephen King's a pretty popular author, and I would say this is one of his more famous works. This book is about a famous author who finds himself in a car accident, and then he ends up being taken to a superfan's house and is cared for when he is there. However, this home is kind of isolated and in the middle of nowhere, and this person claims to be his #1 fan, and she kind of is obsessed with him. Throughout the book, her true nature really begins to unravel, and we're learning more about her obsession with the author, and the author is learning more about what he is going to be facing during his time locked in this house. He's also forced to write a book for this superfan that is a continuation in his series of the Misery novels. I really enjoyed this book. It's definitely not my favorite of his, but I'm finding that overall, I'm not really a big Stephen King fan. I read his books mostly because they're recommended to me by my dad, and while I enjoy them, it's not something I am actively going and seeking out. It's definitely a classic, and I think that the way it was written was very unique. The story overall is something that you don't see often, and I like that it's a one-of-a-kind book. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Overall, the writing honestly was a 3.5 for me, but the story was intriguing enough for me to bump it up to that 4-star rating. The next book that I read was Bunny by Mona Awad. Bunny is about a socially isolated graduate student who finds herself in the midst of a group of girls who call themselves Bunny. She's always forced to do classwork with these people, and she's always felt like an outcast, but then one day she gets called to participate in one of their little group outings, and after that she becomes pretty entangled in the bizarre world of the bunnies. And this story is really just following time with the bunnies. It is really strange. It's hard for me to go in depth about what the book is about without spoiling anything. I think that with this book, you kind of just have to go in blind and know that you're not exactly going to know what's going on. I do think that there's a lot of really great metaphors in this book, and it is really funny. I think that with any reread that I do of this book, I would definitely get more out of it. I definitely would love to go back and try and analyze the book a little bit more. This first read was really nice to get a general overview of the story. I really liked Mona Awad's writing, and I loved the academia setting of it. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if it's for everyone, but if you're into maybe dark academias or kind of twisted books, or you're looking for something a little on the weird side, I would definitely recommend picking up Bunny. The next book that I read was Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I wasn't really planning on picking up this book anytime soon, but one of the booktubers that I follow, Carolyn Marie Reads, started a book club, and this was the first book that the group would be reading. So even though I wasn't necessarily itching to read it or in the mood, I did end up picking up this book. Howl's Moving Castle is about a younger woman who is cursed, and she has to live life as an older woman. After she's cursed, she goes and seeks refuge in a castle, and this castle happens to move, and it is owned by Howl. The whole book is her really navigating the castle's magical wonders, and in the book she discovers a lot of really nice truths about courage and love and hope, and she's having the insights of an older woman while also experiencing her younger self. I didn't end up rating this book, and I didn't do it because I didn't feel like it would be a very fair rating. First of all, it's a young adult book, and I couldn't really tell how I wanted to rate that. I don't even know if it's young adult. It might just be like teen or children's novel. So I wasn't judging the writing too harshly in this book. It definitely felt magical. And I think that with a future reread, if I'm in the mood, I could potentially love this book and find it as a comfort read, but it didn't really hit for me at this present time that I read it. I should also add that I've never watched the movie, so I don't know if watching it before would give me more of a preconceived notion of what to expect. I know a lot of people really love Howl's Moving Castle and think of it as a comfort movie. I'm definitely looking forward to watching the movie now that I've read the book, and I think that that would inspire a reread. So I don't know if I said it, but yes, overall I don't give this book a rating, but I would recommend it. The next book that I read was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I read this in a previous reading vlog, and I didn't really go that in depth. It was a really short vlog. So basically, The Nightingale is set in World War II, and it follows two sisters in Nazi-occupied France. These two sisters end up taking very different paths to get away from oppression and navigate their time throughout the war. Both of their journeys follow different takes on resiliency and the human spirit, and each of them make their own different sacrifices in the name of family and love. This book kind of was heartbreaking, I'm not gonna lie. It really pulled me in. The writing was stunning. It was very intricate. It was intricate enough to feel beautifully written, but at the same time, it felt very real. So it felt like I was living the story rather than reading it. I love the way that Kristen Hanna wrote this book. I loved the story. All the characters were wonderful, and I definitely could see myself picking up another book by this author in the near future. I ended up giving this book 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you like historical fiction, but I really don't think you need to love historical fiction to pick up this book. You could be completely new to the genre, and it would be really a wonderful read. I definitely recommend it. The next book, it was actually an audiobook listen for me, and it was Just 6 Numbers by Martin Rees. So this book explores 6 fundamental numbers: N, epsilon, omega, lambda, Q, and D. The author really examines how these numbers shape the universe, and he's really trying to emphasize how any slight changes to these numbers would alter life as we know it. This book was really interesting. I audiobooked it, so I will say that I didn't grasp as much as I possibly could have by reading the words on paper, and I could definitely see myself buying this book in the future and giving it a reread to get more out of it. It was pretty in-depth about the numbers, but at the same time it gave a good general idea of what he was talking about. It is a nonfiction. I don't know if I mentioned that. So if you're into nonfiction, you're into numbers or math, the universe, science, I would definitely recommend this book. It was very short, easy to get through. It didn't go super in-depth, but it went in-depth enough to not be a pointless book. And yeah, I would recommend this one. The next book that I read was Migrations by Charlotte McGonaghy. This woman embarks on a journey to track down the migration path and possibly the final migration of the Arctic tern. This book is set further in the future. They don't necessarily say a year, but they're kind of aiming at the fact that it's really far into climate change and the possibilities of that. So a lot of animals are going extinct, and Arctic terns may be the last one, and those birds happen to have the longest migration path out of all the other bird species. This woman is really connected to these birds and determined to go on this journey to track this migration and potentially save the species. This is a fiction book, by the way. It kind of sounds like a nonfiction, but it is set in more of a futuristic world, but it's kind of hinting at the fact that this could one day be possible. So it felt like a very real read, while at the same time I kind of had the sense of comfort knowing that we're not going through this right now. The story is really hinting at her more of a haunting past that she has. You don't exactly know what she's been through, but you reveal a little more with each chapter as you go through. The story really follows the themes of loss and love, and also the possibility of the resilience of life on our changing planet. I don't have a ton to say about this book other than I really loved it. If you know me as a person, you could tell just by the summary that I just gave that this is a book that I would really enjoy. I would recommend it to anyone. I'm very glad that I picked this up. I would love to reread this again one day, and I would like to own the physical copy so I can go ahead and annotate it. It was very beautifully written, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. The final book that I read this month was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. This is the 4th book in the Harry Potter series. I have read Harry Potter before, and I'm just rereading the books so I can go ahead and watch all the movies. I've actually never seen all the movies, and I'm watching them with my fiance, so that's been really fun. I don't want to go too in-depth about this book because it's the 4th in a series, and I feel like everyone kind of knows Harry Potter, so I really liked it. I liked it more than my initial reads. I got more out of it reading it as an adult. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it. That really wraps up the 7 books that I read in November. Hopefully I was able to summarize that in a short amount of time. I had a really great reading month. Most of my reads ranged from 4, 4.5, 5 stars, somewhere in that area, other than the books that I gave no rating to. I think a reason for that is that I was reading books, for the most part, that I was in the mood for. I didn't set a literal goal of specific books that I wanted to read, but my critiques about this reading month are that I read a lot of books on my Kindle, which is great because I pay for Kindle Unlimited, but I also have a ton of books on my physical TBR that I really need to get through. So going forward, I would like to try a little bit harder to tackle physical books that I own. And also I felt like the books that I read this month were by authors that were not exactly diverse, and I think it is really important to read diversely. I think it helps give an understanding of different cultures and different perspectives and experiences, and I think it can help foster a sense of empathy and really challenge the different ways that we view the world. So going forward, I would like to read a little bit more diversely if possible. Kind of sucks though, I'm looking at all the books that I own physically. A lot of the books that I own are not by very diverse authors. So going forward, when I buy books, I will try and put a little more emphasis on that. But yeah, that's just one of the goals I have going forward and a critique about this past month. So now, really quickly, because I'm not going to film a whole nother video talking about this, I want to talk about some of the books that I'm looking forward to reading in December. So first and foremost, I will be reading War and Peace in December. This is a pretty big book, so I'm giving myself the entire month to read it. And I think it's like 1,200 pages, and I'm dividing it up to be about 40 pages a day so I can get through it, but it stays manageable. It is already December and I've started it already. I'm really enjoying it so far, but we'll save my discussion for a future video. And I'm also in the middle of 3 other books because, like I said earlier, I am still in a bit of a reading slump and I'm not very motivated to read. So I'm currently reading past President Jimmy Carter's memoir, or one of his memoirs. He's actually written a lot of books. I'm also reading The Electric Kingdom, which is kind of a young adult sci-fi fantasy book, and I'm reading Ninth House. So those are the books that I'm in the middle of currently. Those 4 books right there are definitely enough to keep me busy throughout December, but I have some other books that if I find the time, I would like to try and get to. So this is kind of going off of my physical TBR only. I would like to read physical books if possible. We'll see how that goes. So I have 2 books that I've recently received from Book of the Month, not sponsored because I am not there yet. I have The Road of Bones, which was my November pick, I believe. Yeah, my November pick. I had to check. I don't know, literally not that far in the past, but whatever. This is a fantasy book and it is the first in a series. And I've been wanting to read more fantasy, so hopefully that will be good for me. And then my December Book of the Month pick is Homeseeking. This is a literary fiction, I think a debut author. So looking forward to picking up one or both of those in December. For a while, I had my eyes on rereading Little Women in December because it definitely felt like a Christmassy book. Not sure if I'll get to that since I'm reading War and Peace, and even though this looks a little small, it is still a pretty big book. And then finally, a book that I've had on my physical TBR for a while is Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. I have read a book by James Baldwin before, and it was a while ago before I was really back into reading, but I do remember enjoying his writing style, and I think that this is maybe considered a classic, so that could be a fun read. But for now, that's really all I have to talk about. I appreciate you if you stuck through this video. If you read any of these books, please let me know which ones, and we can talk about it in the comment section below. And also, I'm just gonna throw this question out here in case someone's watching all the way to the end. I'm wanting to film 2 other videos in December. One of them I already have planned. The other one is going to be some sort of a yearly reading wrap up, and I'm trying to decide between either like the BookTube 2024 reading tag or whatever, or a tier ranking video where I go through and actually like physically rank all my books. So if you have a preference on what you would like to see me do, feel free to leave a comment. Yeah, that's all I have to say today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you again. Bye.